Welcome to the JCPS MTSS training on the Teacher Clarity Toolkit with a focus on the high yield practice, learning intentions, and success criteria with scaffolding. I am Sarah Adams, MTSS Engagement Resource Teacher with Elementary Zone 1.
Hi, I'm Kelly Hagan, MTSS Resource Teacher with the Middle School Zone. Please take a moment and type the case-sensitive bit.ly into your web browser. This will give you access to the presentation. These are the components of MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. As you can see, MTSS provides multiple levels of support for all learners and aligns resources and support with our district's 6 systems for students and for teachers who deliver and support instruction. MTSS addresses academic, social, emotional, and behavioral development. It focuses on overall school improvement that is sustainable. Let me start by showing you the components of our department. This concept map shows a visual of the departments within MTSS. The MTSS Academic Department provides teachers with Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention and academic support. The supervisor and point of contact for this department is Donna Lawson. The MTSS Behavior Department supports schools in implementing school-wide behavior systems and frameworks, including PBIS and restorative practices. The supervisor and point of contact for this department is Sandra Hensel. The MTSS Re-Engagement Department supports students who are transitioning back to their home schools from schools such as Minor Daniels Academy and Breckenridge Metropolitan. The supervisor and point of contact for this department is Dr. Naomi Brahim. The goal of our department, the MTSS Engagement Department, is to increase student achievement by equipping teachers with high-yield pedagogical practices to maximize student engagement. The supervisor and point of contact for our department is also Dr. Naomi Brahim. 6 MTSS toolkits were created to provide resources for Tier 1 instructional practices to increase student engagement and reduce student behaviors. Here is a link to the 6 MTSS toolkits. According to John Hattie, author of Visible Learning, with an effect size of 0.75, teacher clarity is the incorporation of learning intentions and success criteria to describe where students are going in their learning, how they are progressing, and where they will go next. The Teacher Clarity Toolkit success criteria focuses on the design, alignment, communication, and revisiting of standards based on learning intentions and success criteria. The Teacher Clarity Toolkit provides the definitions of driving and compelling questions, learning intentions, and success criteria as shown here. You can see the driving or compelling question motivates, guides, and fosters learning as students deal with curiosities about how things work. The learning intentions describe what we want the students to be learning, while the success criteria describes the evidence of learning. John Hattie states that any tool, linguistic or conceptual, that can be used to bridge the gap for students can be considered a scaffold. He states that this engagement practice has an effect size of 0.82, making it a high-yield practice for student learning. In order to accelerate learning and engage students in our lessons, we will learn how to use scaffolds to develop driving question, deconstruct learning intentions and success criteria, You, the learner, will be able to determine where scaffolds can be used when planning the driving question, learning intentions, and success criteria. Here we have a 6th grade ELA standard and a developed driving question of what should our relationship with animals be? The driving question frames and focuses the inquiry cycle along with reframing the standards to provide relevance. This question drives the storyline of the learning as students move throughout the instructional unit. The question itself is formulated around a standalone standard or a bundled group of standards. It is important that the question is open-ended to allow for divergent thinking and responses based upon evidence. This can also lead to more questions to be explored with no easy answer. The goal is to explore or answer the driving question by completing a formative performance task or assessment. There are 4 components that must be integrated into every learning intention. Here you see a 6th grade standard and sample learning intention. Learning intentions should specify what the students are supposed to learn, as well as be clear and focused on the outcome of learning. In this example, the learning intention is connected to the central ideas and citing particular details. Learning intentions should be a summary or general restatement of the standard. Learning intentions should be written in age-appropriate, kid-friendly language, but retain the rigor and intent of the standard. These 4 components are a vital need for finding the answer to the driving question for the unit. Success criteria also has 4 components. In this ELA example, you see the standard and possible learning intention. Success criteria provides a map to the learning destination. It describes the evidence students must produce to show they have achieved the learning intention. The success criteria also identifies the details needed to achieve the learning intention. Just like the learning intention, success criteria must also retain the rigor and intent of the standard through the use of specific terms taken directly from the standard. By having the 4 components of the success criteria, students know the expectation of the products they will produce to demonstrate their learning of not only the learning intention, but the driving question and standard as well. Take a moment to think about an upcoming unit or lesson. Identify the standard or bundled standards that will be your focus. Brainstorm a driving question that will require understanding and application of the standard in order to be answered. What might be the learning intention and success criteria to support the learning of the standard? Make connections of how the learning intention and success criteria support students in answering the driving question.
We are going to look at some more standards in different content areas. In each example, you will see the standard at the top. Then you will see the driving question, learning intention, and success criteria. Let's look at an elementary ELA example. In the standard RI 3.8, you will notice describe, reason, and evidence have been highlighted. These words will be articulated in both the driving question and the learning intention. As mentioned previously, the driving question is formulated around the standard. It drives the storyline of the learning. The learning intention specifies what students should learn. From the learning intention, success criteria is established. This is the evidence students must produce to show they have achieved the learning intention. Here's an example of a secondary ELA example. Again, you will see the highlighted words from the standard are articulated in the learning intention in student-friendly language. From this standard, a driving question could be, how does reputation influence the perception of others and ourselves? It is an open-ended question that will drive the learning of the standard. Here's an elementary math example. From the fourth grade standard NF1, a driving question could be, how do I know if these fractions are equivalent? This standard and driving question will be taught in multiple lessons and will contain several learning intentions and success criteria. One learning intention could be, we will build fraction models that are equivalent. From there, some possible success criteria could be, I will determine if fractions are equivalent, I will build visual fraction models, and I will justify why fractions are or are not equivalent. The same would apply in this high school Algebra 1 math example. You will notice a driving question was formulated from bundled standards. From there, a learning intention was crafted and success criteria was determined for that learning intention. As with the example above, this would include several lessons to determine if students have achieved mastery of the standards. Here is an example of how an elementary science standard was used to create driving questions, learning intention, and success criteria. There is a driving question from the unit level as well as the lesson level. The overall unit driving question is, why do some things wash up on the beach and others don't? Then, in a particular lesson, the driving question could be, how do different looking waves move a floating object? The learning intention and possible success criteria are provided for this lesson. The same process is used in the secondary science example. The driving question is open-ended and allows for divergent thinking and can lead to more questions to be explored. The learning intention specifies that students are to learn how to design, construct, and test a solution to a thermal energy design problem. From that learning intention, students will show evidence by identifying how thermal energy is transferred in their design solution. They could also describe criteria and constraints that will be taken into account. They could evaluate their design against the criteria and constraints. These would be possible ways for students to show achievement in the learning intention. Next, we have an elementary social studies example. There are bundled standards, and from those bundled standards, we have a compelling question with the supporting question from a lesson. The learning intention shown is based on a lesson formative performance task. An example of success criteria from the lesson is provided along with the rubric link. If you click on the link, it will take you to our social studies department where some scaffolded rubrics that could be used in formative performance tasks are provided. You will notice the components of a compelling question, learning intention, and success criteria are present in this middle school social studies example. Remember, the driving or compelling question is open-ended and can lead to more questions. The learning intention is derived from the standard and specifies what students are to learn in the lesson. The success criteria is the evidence students will produce to show they have achieved the learning intention. When you are developing your units and lessons, refer often to the JCPS curriculum frameworks. As you can see, ELA and math at all grade levels have included possible driving questions and success criteria for each standard or unit of study. You can also find these in science and social studies. These can be used as is or can be modified. The examples in the JCPS curriculum frameworks should serve as a guide or a starting point when determining your driving compelling questions, learning intentions, and success criteria. There are benefits for providing students with compelling questions. These questions invite students to engage in inquiry learning. These questions deal with curiosities and how things work. It allows students to construct arguments and use their voice in the learning process while building connections to new learning. There are benefits to crafting learning intention and success criteria for students. According to Hattie, communicating the learning intentions and success criteria to students provides clarity and allows students to answer three important questions. What are you learning? Why are you learning? And how do you know you are successful? This will allow students to own their learning. This is a visual that will allow you to see how we scaffold from a compelling question to success criteria. We start with an overall driving or compelling question, and then we zoom in more and more as we go down the ladder. As we get more specific, we are able to see if students have successfully answered the question, and we work towards creating backpack artifacts. Let's revisit your brainstorm of an upcoming lesson or unit from the beginning of this training. What might be some modifications you need to make to ensure clarity? What might be some supporting questions needed to move the learning process forward with your driving compelling questions? And how might students initially answer the driving compelling question? In this training, you should now be able to answer the compelling question of how teachers provide students with clarity to own their learning. You have learned how to use scaffolds to deconstruct learning intentions and success criteria. Your evidence is that you are able to determine where scaffolds can be used when planning driving questions, learning intentions, and success criteria. Thank you for joining us to learn more about driving compelling questions, learning intentions, and success criteria with scaffolding. For more information about the MTSS toolkits and other high yield practices, please visit our website.